He sat on a cold bench with nothing but a worn coat and a story no one could guess. The city moved past him like a river of faces, yet his eyes stayed fixed on something far away. Wealth had once been his shield, but now anonymity was his only ally. Somewhere beyond the noise and the neon, he believed a fragment of truth was still waiting for him. And on that ordinary afternoon, a woman with tired hands and a steady heart stepped into his path. What happens when a man who owns everything gives it all up to discover what can't be bought? Can compassion break through a wall of lies? And can a single act of kindness change 2 lives forever? In this story, the answers unfold slowly like secrets whispered in the dark, revealing not just a love story, but a test of courage, forgiveness, and human connection. He woke before dawn in a glass tower that kissed the clouds and still felt small. Leonard Matthews could buy paintings, penthouses, private dinners, yet silence kept nibbling at the edges. His calendar was full, though his chest felt hollow, like a room after the party. He caught his reflection and almost did not recognize the man staring back. People praised his vision, but their smiles slid off like rain on marble. He laughed in meetings and never laughed on the ride home. The city glittered and somehow looked tired, as if it had learned his secret. Something had to give, or he would keep drifting farther from himself. He tested memories the way one tests a loose tooth, curious and uneasy. The first money had tasted like fireworks, bright and loud and gone too fast. Then came deals and toasts and the itch for a higher floor. Every new number promised warmth and delivered a colder room. Friends brought favors, not questions, and left before the truth showed up. At night he counted zeros and felt smaller with every digit. He wanted a voice that did not want anything from him. He did not know where to find it, and that scared him more than losing. On a gray Tuesday, he sat in his car and let the engine idle. Across the street, a man wrapped in a blanket spoke to a stray cat. They shared nothing but a crumb of bread, and it looked like a feast. Leonard watched, blinked, and felt a pinch he could not ignore. What kind of life spends fortunes to feel less than a crumb? He turned off the engine and listened to the city breathe. A wild thought rose like a tide and would not go down. If money kept hiding the truth, he would strip it away and listen. He began with a simple plan that did not feel simple once it touched his pride. He put away his tailored shirts and left his watch in a drawer. He found threadbare clothes that carried the smell of time. He rubbed dust on his hands until his palms looked like old maps. In the mirror, his eyes stayed the same, and that was the point. He needed to be nobody to learn who he was. The elevator ride down felt longer than a flight across oceans. When the lobby doors opened, the city felt new and a little dangerous. On the sidewalk, he stood among strangers and felt something like weather in. Cars hummed, feet hurried. A siren sighed somewhere up the block. He learned the rhythm of waiting at corners without a destination. A cup of coffee cost more than he wanted to admit. He asked for water at a diner, and the cashier looked through him. So this is what it feels like when a name has no power. It stung, then it cleared his sight, like rain on a window. He noticed faces, not phones, and stories living inside tired eyes. By afternoon, he found a bench with a cracked slat and a view of a bakery. The smell of warm bread floated over like a promise from childhood. He counted coins and came up a few short, then laughed softly at himself. Money had never been a problem until he asked it not to be. He watched a woman offer the last bite of her sandwich to a boy. The boy smiled with a missing tooth, and the city brightened. Leonard wondered how long it had been since kindness. The answer sat in his throat and would not come out. Twilight folded over the buildings, and the glass tower looked far away. He felt a tug toward that elevator and the easy way back. Then another tug, gentler, toward the unknown street ahead. He followed the second tug and let the night teach him its map. A street musician played a tune that sounded like apology and hope. Coins clinked in the open case, and he added his last 2. The musician nodded and kept playing as if saluting a quiet pact. Leonard kept walking, lighter than he had any right to be. He bedded down under a bridge where the river mumbled secrets. Cold crept in like a careful thief, and he hugged his thin coat. He pictured his king-size bed and felt both shame and distance. The river kept talking, and he listened the way a child listened. He did not sleep so much as drift with little anchors of thought. Faces came, deals came, a laugh that never reached his eyes came. Somewhere before dawn, he made a promise without words. He would stay in this truth until it broke something open. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee he could not afford. He washed his face at a public fountain and met his own gaze. He looked older and somehow more honest, which felt like progress. A delivery truck hissed to a stop, and the driver cursed the curb. Leonard smiled because even the curses sounded alive out here. He crossed to the corner where traffic slowed and people hurried. If love still lived in this city, it would walk these sidewalks. He decided to wait for it, not as a king, but as a man. By noon, hunger pressed a hand against his ribs and he swallowed pride. He asked a passerby if there was a shelter nearby, voice steady but soft. The man shrugged and kept moving, and Leonard thanked him anyway. A gust lifted a napkin that danced like a white bird and fell at his feet. He picked it up, folded it, and slipped it in his pocket as if saving grace. Somewhere a clock chimed, though he could not see a clock. The day tilted, and with it, the story he had not yet met. At the edge of the crowd, a woman slowed, turned, and started toward him. Lisa Sanders hurried along the sidewalk with her tote pressed to her. The clock in her head scolded her for every red light she had hit. Rain from the night before left the street shining like fresh paint. She spotted a man near the curb with eyes that did not ask for pity. Something in that quiet gaze slowed her steps against her will. She reached into her pocket and found a few worn bills and coin. He thanked her with a voice that sounded careful and grateful. That simple exchange felt larger than the city around them. She noticed his hands first, nicked and dusty like he had wrestled with days. He noticed the way she met his eyes without flinching or looking away. People flowed around them like a river split by a stubborn rock. Lisa asked if he had eaten, and he smiled like he did not want to be trouble. She shook her head at the thought and said, "Everyone needs breakfast." He nodded, and the knot in his throat loosened just a touch. They walked toward the corner cart that steamed in the cool air. The smell of eggs and toast curled up from the grill. The vendor greeted Lisa by name and teased her about running late. She laughed, then ordered 2 plates as if it were the most natural thing. Leonard watched her kindness glide across small moments like light. She made room at the tiny counter and placed napkins like a hostess. He ate slowly, tasting salt and warmth and something larger. Lisa asked where he was staying, and he said here and there. Her brow lifted with worry that looked both firm and gentle. He felt seen, and that scared him less than it used to. Between bites, she learned the outline of a story with pieces missing. He learned she worked nights and mornings when bills demanded it. She spoke of mopping floors until the stars looked tired of shining. He spoke of wandering and trying to hear the right voice. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and listened like a promise. He folded his napkin to buy a second of calm before answering. A bus roared past and broke the moment, then returned it. They finished the meal with a quiet that did not feel empty. Lisa reached into her tote and pulled out a small lunch box. She pressed it into his hands and said it was nothing fancy. Inside sat rice, beans, and a piece of chicken wrapped in foil. He blinked because love can look like leftovers and still shine. She told him to heat it later at the mission on Grove. He told her he would and felt the weight of being trusted. The box felt heavier than the coins he had counted all morning. He held it like a gift you do not set down quickly. A siren called from far off, and the city shifted its shoulders. Lisa checked the time and winced with an "oh, come on" under her breath. She admitted she was running late, but she would not leave him confused. She scribbled directions to the shelter she liked because they listened. Her handwriting leaned a little to the right like it was in a hurry. He folded the paper and tucked it beside the lunch, as if filing hope. They shared a small laugh about getting lost in a city they both knew. That laugh sounded like a door creaking open, somewhere safe. Before she left, Lisa asked his name and waited for honesty. Leonard felt the old reflex rise, shiny and false, and let it pass. He said his name slowly, like he was trying it on again. She smiled and repeated it, turning the sound into something warm. He asked for her name, and she gave it with a quick nod. Lisa said she worked nearby and passed this corner most days. She told him to watch out for the afternoon crowd on this block. He said he would, and meant it in more ways than one. Traffic coughed, pigeons argued, and a baker tossed out a paper sack. Lisa snatched the sack midair and handed Leonard the extra rolls. He grinned because luck had decided to be obvious for once. She teased that the city pays if you look at it the right way. He answered that he was just learning how to look again. Her eyes softened, carrying a light that was not fragile. She told him to keep the rolls for later, since mornings vanish fast. He promised to save them, though hunger had other ideas. As she stepped back, Lisa studied his face with quiet curiosity. He held her gaze and felt an old door swing in his chest. She asked if he needed anything else besides directions and food. He wanted to say a second chance, and almost did. Instead, he asked for the name of a place that hires without fuss. She mentioned a small warehouse where the foreman was fair. Then she added that she could ask around at her building. He exhaled like someone had cracked a window in a stale room. Lisa waved and started down the block with quick, determined strides. Leonard watched her move through the rush like she owned her lane. He felt the street grow brighter, as if the clouds had made space. The lunchbox warmed his hands, even though it was not hot. He called out a thank you that carried further than the traffic. She turned, lifted her hand, and kept moving with a half smile. He looked at the directions again and tucked them close to his heart. Somewhere behind the noise, a new path waited for the next step. Lisa started showing up at the corner with quiet regularity, a small pulse of kindness in the chaos. Leonard noticed how her steps slowed as soon as she spotted him, as if she had saved a bit of time just for that pause. She brought coffee some mornings, soup on colder afternoons, and always that steady look in her eyes. He learned to wait for her silhouette the way a ship waits for the lighthouse beam. Sometimes she stayed, and sometimes she hurried off, but always left a trace of warmth. Each act felt simple but reached places he had sealed shut. He began to wonder how many lives she carried in her hands. It changed the air around him, and he did not know how to name it. One morning she arrived with 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and a thermos under her arm. Leonard tried to refuse, but his hands betrayed him, reaching before his words did. She laughed and told him the sandwiches would spoil if no one ate them. They sat on the bench like old friends, though they were not yet anything. The city roared and honked and pretended not to notice, but the moment held steady. He asked about her day, and she shrugged with a small, weary smile. She asked about his, and he gave fragments, careful not to lie. Between bites, silence built a bridge where words had failed. Lisa began collecting flyers for odd jobs and handing them to him folded. He stuffed them in his pocket like secret codes and read them under the streetlight later. Some were for lifting boxes, some for sweeping floors, all for starting somewhere. She spoke about dignity the way some speak about air, necessary and invisible. He caught himself echoing her phrases in his mind hours afterward. When she spoke, it was never pity, always possibility. Leonard realized he had stopped scanning faces for suspicion and started looking for doors. Her presence taught him the city could still open if you knocked softly. He watched her hands one afternoon as she carefully packed a container of stew. The scent of spices rose between them like a memory he could not place. She asked him to hold the lid while she tied a cloth around it. He noticed a thin scar near her wrist and almost asked but didn't. Instead, he asked what kind of spice she used, and she laughed at the change of subject. The laugh broke something brittle inside him and left it lighter. He wondered how a stranger's generosity could feel so familiar. He found himself guarding the container like it held more than food. Leonard began helping her carry bags when she came off her shift. They walked side by side, a strange pairing of 2 worlds bending closer. He learned about the elevator she cleaned at night and the hallways that smelled of bleach. She learned about his sleepless hours and the silence of empty penthouses. Neither pressed too hard. Both knew wounds take their time. Each walk became a thread, weaving a pattern they could not yet see. The city's noise dimmed when they spoke, as if granting them a small stage. Their footsteps created a rhythm more honest than any deal he had closed. Some afternoons she slipped him a note with an address or a number. He called one once and found day work unloading crates at the docks. The foreman barely looked at him but paid cash, no questions asked. His hands blistered, but the ache felt like proof he was still alive. Lisa asked how it went, and he smiled with cracked lips. She offered a salve she mixed herself from herbs her mother swore by. He took it, wondering how long it had been since someone cared for his skin. The gesture dug deeper than the blisters, reaching an older wound. Lisa also taught him small tricks to survive the streets with more dignity. Which church served the cleanest soup? Which corner stayed warmer at night? She even handed him an extra scarf one icy morning, without comment. He wrapped it tight and felt a ghost of perfume that reminded him of childhood. When he tried to thank her, she brushed it off like it was nothing. Her voice held no tremor of superiority, only steady warmth. He began to see her as a compass, not a savior. That distinction freed him more than he expected. One evening, Leonard surprised her by arriving first at their usual spot. He had found a part-time gig sweeping the station and wanted to tell her. She smiled with the kind of pride that made his chest ache. It felt like he had done something for both of them, not just himself. He offered to buy her a coffee with his earnings, and she accepted softly. They drank from paper cups while the city lights blinked awake. For the first time in months, he felt a future leaning toward him instead of away. He could almost hear the gears of his life clicking back into place. As days turned into weeks, their exchanges became less about food and more about present. They shared stories like secret notes, folded and passed back and forth. Lisa spoke of her son's drawings taped on their fridge and her mother's fading strength. Leonard spoke of a childhood on a small street far from the glass towers. Each detail added color to a sketch neither of them had planned. Sometimes they sat without speaking, letting the city's breath fill the spaces. He felt no need to perform. She felt no need to rescue. That mutual surrender opened a door neither had named yet. Leonard realized he was no longer waiting for someone to save him. He was learning to stand inside a truth built from shared moments. Lisa noticed the change but did not point it out, letting it grow quietly. They still met at the corner, but now the corner felt like theirs. Strangers rushed past, and their small world held steady amid the noise. He began to think of her not just as a kind stranger, but as a pulse of life itself. The thought scared him and thrilled him at once, pulling him forward. And somewhere, without either of them saying it, the story began to shift again. Lisa rarely spoke about herself at first, preferring to ask and listen. But one damp morning, as they sat on a low wall by the park, her guard thinned. Leonard noticed her hands trembling slightly as she poured coffee from a flask. He asked if she was cold, and she smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. The silence between them opened like a doorway, and she stepped through. She began to speak of nights that never ended and mornings that came too soon. Her voice held no drama, only the weight of a long-carrying truth. Leonard listened, feeling the air shift with each word. She told him about Isabel Harris, her mother whose health had been fading for years. The old woman's lungs fought for air like wings trapped under glass. Lisa worked double shifts to pay for medicine and appointments. She learned how to measure blood pressure, how to check oxygen, how to pray quietly. Each night she came home to a dim apartment and a body she feared to lose. She confessed that sometimes she wanted to sleep for days and could not. Leonard felt the confession like a stone dropped in still water. He saw her strength not as a story, but as a living scar. Then she spoke of Peter Sanders, her boy with restless hands and bright questions. Abandoned by his father before his first birthday, he clung to her like a lifeline. Lisa traded her own dreams for his meals, her nights for his homework. She taped his drawings to the kitchen wall like windows into better worlds. Peter's laughter was the thread that kept her from unraveling completely. But sometimes even that laughter carried the echo of a missing present. Leonard imagined the small apartment filled with drawings and quiet endurance. He felt a surge of shame for the comfort he had once called normal. Lisa explained how she had been studying nursing before everything changed. She remembered the textbooks stacked like promises on her nightstand. When her mother fell ill, she had to choose between tuition and survival. She chose survival and never looked back except at night, eyes open. She spoke of the hospital halls she used to walk as a student, now as a cleaner. The same floors, the same smell, but a different badge on her chest. Leonard watched her as she spoke, her posture steady, but her eyes distant. He wondered how someone so weighed down could still offer him light. She did not frame her story as tragedy, but as fact. There was no hint of martyrdom in her tone, only quiet determination. She said people think sacrifice feels noble, but mostly it feels like exhaustion. She kept moving because stopping meant unraveling, and there was no net. Leonard felt the room of his old life shrink around him as he listened. He had once spent more on a single bottle of wine than she earned in a week. Now he sat beside her, sharing bread and stories, unsure who was saving whom. The question gnawed at him like a riddle he needed to solve. Lisa pulled from her tote a small photo of her mother holding Peter as a baby. The edges were bent, the colors faded, but the smiles shone. She handed it to Leonard without a word, and he took it carefully. The baby's eyes stared straight at the camera, unafraid and curious. He asked if Peter liked school, and she said yes, mostly. He asked if Isabel still painted like she used to, and Lisa smiled faintly. She said Isabel's hands shook now, but her spirit still drew shapes in the air. Leonard folded the photo back and felt it linger like a pulse in his hands. Some evenings, Lisa admitted she worried about leaving Peter alone at night. She described how she locked the door twice and left a note under his pillow. She told Leonard she hated missing the bedtime stories, but bills do not wait for bedtime, and medicine does not come free. Leonard's throat tightened as he pictured the boy alone, waiting for footsteps. He thought of his own father's absence and how money had filled the gap poorly. The memory stirred an ache he had hidden under business plans. He wondered if helping them could help himself, and quickly hid the thought. She said resilience is not something you choose, but something that chooses you. When the world closes a door, she explained, you push on the walls until a crack appears. Leonard listened as if she were teaching him a language he had never learned. Her words rolled over him like waves, not soft but steady. He realized she had been carrying more than groceries and lunch boxes. She carried the weight of dignity in a city that rewards masks, and yet she still found room to hand pieces of her day to a stranger. That contradiction left him quietly astonished. Lisa stood up after telling him all this, brushing crumbs from her skirt. She said she had to get back to work, but she would see him later. Her voice wavered just once on the word later. Leonard wanted to reach for her hand, but stayed still. He watched her disappear into the crowd like a secret slipping back into the world. His chest felt both heavier and lighter, an odd double gravity. He knew her story had only begun to unfold, and somewhere inside that story, his own was waiting to change shape. Leonard stayed on the bench long after she had gone. He stared at the river of people and tried to picture her apartment, her routines. He wondered how she managed to still smile at him after such days. He thought of Peter's drawings and Isabel's trembling hands. His mind built a small image of them sitting around a table he had never seen. He imagined himself there, not as a benefactor, but as a guest. That vision planted itself quietly in his chest, warm and unsettling. He did not know yet how far this thread would pull him. Leonard had begun to think the disguise would hold as long as he needed it. Days blurred into weeks, and each morning he found himself leaning on the corner railing, waiting for Lisa. Her lunches, her words, and even her silences had become part of his routine. He had stopped checking his phone hidden in his bag, stopped caring about the other life above the streets. Yet the city has a way of folding past and present together. One afternoon, as the sun tilted low, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. He froze, the name ringing like a forgotten bell in a locked hall. That moment cracked the thin shell he had built for himself. Mark Ferris, an old acquaintance from the business circuit, stood at the curb. Mark's suit was crisp, his shoes polished, his eyes quick with recognition. Leonard saw the flicker cross his face before the smile spread. The last time they'd met, it had been over a contract worth millions. Now Leonard wore a thrift coat and dust clung to his collar. Mark stepped closer, tilting his head like someone inspecting a trick. Lisa watched quietly, sensing a shift, but not yet understanding. Leonard's pulse thudded at his temples, each beat a warning. "Leonard Matthews," Mark said, tasting the name like a dare. The sound struck Lisa harder than she expected, though she didn't know why. Leonard tried to laugh it off, but the sound died halfway. Mark asked how the little social experiment was going, loud enough for Lisa to hear. The words sliced open the careful mystery Leonard had woven. Lisa blinked, looking between them, her lunchbox still in her hands. Leonard's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. The air around them thickened, as if holding its breath. Mark went on, a mix of amusement and disbelief spilling from him. He spoke of boardrooms, private jets, and headlines, describing Leonard's life like a headline reel. Lisa's grip on the lunchbox tightened until her knuckles blanched. She had offered him meals, jobs, a piece of her world. Now she listened to Mark's voice turn Leonard's secret into a public spectacle. Leonard wanted to reach out, to stop him, to undo the sound of his name. But each detail Mark dropped, painted the portrait anyway. It was all there, the money, the fame, the life Lisa had never imagined. Lisa felt heat rise in her chest, the kind that comes before a storm. She stepped back, eyes fixed on Leonard, searching for the man she thought she knew. Her mind replayed every moment they had shared, now in a different light. The soup, the notes, the conversation, all tangled with a hidden agenda she had not seen. Leonard tried to explain, but the words stumbled out like broken glass. Mark sensing the drama, but not the depth of the wound he had opened. Pedestrians slowed, sensing a scene they did not understand. Lisa's heart raced, her breath shallow, a quiet thunder gathering inside. Leonard reached for her arm and she pulled it back. He said he was sorry, that he had reason, that he had been searching for something real, but every phrase felt small against the size of the lie. Lisa's face hardened, a mask built in an instant over months of trust. She asked why he had never told her, voice low and steady. Leonard tried to answer, but could not find a beginning that did not betray an end. The city noise rose around them, filling the space where his words failed. Her silence was louder than Mark's taunts. Mark, sensing the discomfort, offered a mocking bow and left. He melted into the crowd like a shadow retreating at sunset. Leonard stood there, feeling the weight of both worlds crushing him. Lisa stared at him as if he were a stranger, wearing Leonard's face. She thought of her son, her mother, the hours she had spent believing in him. She thought of the lunches and the jobs and the hope she had shared. Each memory now stung like a sting hidden in a bloom. Her eyes flicked down at the lunchbox she still held. She handed the lunchbox back to him, not as a gift, but as a wall. Her voice trembled when she told him she could not do this. Leonard wanted to protest, to plead, but shame bound his tongue. He felt the crowd's eyes brushing against him like cold rain. Lisa stepped away, one foot, then another, the distance growing. He tried to follow but stopped, realizing each step might break her further. She turned her head once, enough to let him see the hurt there. Then she disappeared into the moving river of strangers. Leonard remained frozen on the sidewalk long after she was gone. The city's noise dulled to a hum, the buildings blurred. He sat down on the curb, not caring about the dust or the stairs. Everything he had tried to build with honesty had cracked in a second. His disguise now felt like a costume he could not remove. He wondered if she would ever believe anything he said again. His hands trembled over the lunchbox, a symbol of both kindness and loss. He had searched for truth and found a wound instead. Night fell with a cold wind pushing through the avenue. Leonard stood finally, his legs stiff, his chest heavier than before. He started walking without a destination, letting the city decide. Every corner looked sharper, every face more distant. He whispered her name once, testing if the air would still hold it. No echo came back, only the rattle of a train far off. He kept the lunchbox close, unsure if he carried it or it carried him. And, somewhere in the dark, the next test of his heart waited unseen. Lisa did not come back to the corner the next day or the day after. Leonard sat on the bench with the lunchbox, watching the crowd pass without slowing. He scanned every face, hoping for her familiar stride, her steady gaze, but the space where she had stood felt like a missing wall in a house. He replayed the moment with Mark, the reveal, the look on her face. Each detail became a shard cutting at his memory. He realized how deeply her absence now defined his days. It was a silence louder than traffic and harder than concrete. On the third morning he went to the building where she worked, waiting outside. When she finally appeared, she walked fast, her head down, toed tight against her side. He called her name, and she paused only long enough to show she had heard. Her eyes were swollen from nights of thinking she wished had never begun. He tried to explain again, but she held up a hand to stop him. She said she had nothing more to give if it was built on lies. He swallowed his pride, trying to meet her eyes, and failing. The street between them felt wider than an ocean. Lisa's voice was calm but sharp as she spoke. She said she had believed in his story because it mirrored her own struggles. She said trust was her only currency, and he had spent it without care. Leonard wanted to say it had been real for him too, but the words tangled. She reminded him of every meal, every note, every promise he had accepted. He stood there nodding, unable to refute a single charge. People on the sidewalk slowed, sensing a private drama spilling out. Lisa took a step back as if to reclaim her own air. Leonard reached for his wallet, the old reflex of offering money. She saw the motion, and her face darkened, like a storm behind her eyes. She told him if he tried to pay her, she would walk away and never turn back. He froze, the wallet still in his hand, shame flooding him. She said dignity mattered more than any sum he could name. He lowered his hand slowly, realizing how deep the gulf had become. The gesture he thought would mend only widened the crack. His silence said more than another speech ever could. Lisa then told him about Peter and Isabel, her real stakes. She said she could not risk bringing home a man she could not trust. Her voice trembled only when she mentioned her son's name. Leonard felt the weight of his deception settle on each syllable. He pictured the small apartment with its taped drawings, its fragile routines. He saw how his lie had reached beyond her, into those walls. He tried to say he would prove himself, but her face stayed closed. She turned away, clutching her tote like a shield. Days slipped into nights without contact, each one colder. Leonard drifted through shelters and day jobs, trying to find her scent in the air. He remembered the way she handed him food without pity, the way she listened. Now those memories tasted like salt on an old wound. He wrote letters he never sent, rehearsed speeches he never gave. The city lost its glow. The corners lost their meaning. He watched couples pass and wondered if trust could ever be rebuilt. Each dawn felt like another verdict on his failure. Lisa spent those same days circling her own doubts. She wondered if compassion had blinded her, if she had let a stranger too far in. She watched her son draw at the kitchen table, sensing the quiet in her face. Isabel asked about the man with the gentle eyes, and Lisa said nothing. Her nights grew longer as she weighed forgiveness against safety. She thought about his eyes when he had told the truth at last. She wondered if regret alone could be a bridge back. But each time she closed her eyes, she saw Mark's mocking smile. Leonard tried one last time to see her at the hospital entrance. He waited through the end of her shift, hands shoved in his coat pockets. When she appeared, she looked past him, as if he were only another shadow. He stepped into her path and whispered her name once. She stopped, but did not turn, her shoulders stiff. He said he was done hiding, done running, that he wanted to make it right. She said words cost nothing and walked away without looking back. The echo of her footsteps carved a hollow through him. Nights under the bridge grew colder, the city less forgiving. Leonard forced himself to keep working odd jobs, to hold on to some dignity. He carried the scarf she had given him, but could not wear it without pain. Every sound in the street reminded him of a moment with her. He tried to picture a future without her presence and failed. The disguise no longer felt like a test, but like a cage. He wondered if the man he had been could ever fit back into his old life. He wondered if the man he was becoming could survive the loss. Lisa lay awake in her small apartment, listening to her mother's uneven breathing. Peter's drawing of a lighthouse hung crooked on the wall, catching the dim light. She thought about Leonard's face the first time she had seen him. She thought about his face the last time, after the truth cracked open. Somewhere between those two images lay the question she could not answer. She reached for her phone and almost typed his name, then set it down. Her heart pressed against its own walls, restless but cautious. Outside, the city moved on, but something unfinished hung between them. Leonard spent nights rehearsing what he would say if she ever stopped to listen. He imagined the words in the dark, turning them over like stones in a river. Nothing felt strong enough, yet silence felt like surrender. He remembered her eyes, steady and wounded, and knew he had to try. He wanted to show her a version of himself stripped of excuses. He wanted to stand in the raw truth, even if it cost him everything. Each dawn he felt the city press against him like a test. He was still failing, but he rose, carrying his resolve the way he once carried his briefcase. One rainy afternoon he found her near the church steps, waiting for a bus. The rain slicked her hair to her face and blurred the edges of her coat. He approached slowly, holding no umbrella, no coffee, no props. She looked up and saw him, a flicker of old pain crossing her face. He stopped a few feet away, hands empty and open. The street noise wrapped around them like a curtain of static. Leonard spoke first, his voice rough from days of silence. He said her name once as if it were a prayer. Lisa did not turn away but did not move closer either. She asked what he could possibly say to make any of it matter. Her words trembled, just enough to reveal a door still half open. Leonard took a breath deeper than he had in weeks. He said he had been wrong, that he had hidden behind his disguise, not to mock, but to learn. He said she had been the only person who had ever seen him without a price tag. His voice cracked on the last word, and he let it. Rain dotted the church steps like a silent applause no one heard. He went on, telling her he had given away clothes, cars, even his penthouse. He had been working odd jobs, living in shelters, trying to understand what life cost without money. But he admitted he had failed to see how his secrecy could wound someone like her. He told her he did not want forgiveness if it was forced. He wanted a chance to show he could be different, not to buy her trust, but to earn it. Each sentence landed like a small stone on the pavement between them. Lisa listened, her face unreadable, her fingers tapping her tote strap. He could not tell if she was holding back anger or hope. Leonard dropped to one knee, not in a grand gesture, but in exhaustion. He told her he had nothing to offer but his work, his hands, his honesty. He said he could sweep floors, run errands, do whatever it took to prove himself. His voice shook, but he did not stop. He confessed he missed her mother's stories and her son's drawings he had only heard about. He said he did not want to be a ghost at their table, but a guest who earned the chair. Lisa's eyes softened at the mention of her family. She bit her lip, fighting something inside her. Lisa asked why she should believe him now. Her question hung in the air like a bridge without planks. Leonard said he could not ask for belief, only for a chance to demonstrate. He told her he had been volunteering at the shelter kitchen, learning to cook in bulk. He said he had been saving what little he earned to buy Peter a set of colored pencils. He showed her a worn-out card from the shelter, proof of hours spent behind the counter. Lisa stared at the card, her expression softening but still guarded. He said quietly that he was done being a man who hides. She took a step closer, the rain catching in her eyelashes. She told him she had prayed for clarity, not for revenge. She admitted she had missed his presence, even while feeling betrayed. Leonard's throat tightened as her words slipped through the crack in her armor. She said her mother believed people can change if they want to enough. She said Peter had asked about him, which hurt more than she expected. Leonard lowered his head, humbled by the echo of his absence in their home. He whispered thank you, though she had not forgiven him yet. Lisa said if she gave him another chance, there would be rules. Never lie again, never use money to buy trust, and never disappear without a word. She said if he broke any of these, it would be over for good. Leonard nodded before she even finished the sentence. He told her he wanted her conditions, needed them to keep him honest. He promised to work under her eye, to earn every inch back. His eyes burned, but he let the tears stand. The rain blurred them into the street, washing nothing but still cleansing. She handed him a small folded paper, an address for a warehouse job. She said he could start there, see if he was serious about this life. She said her mother would be willing to meet him, but only if he proved consistency first. Leonard took the paper as if it were a passport to a new country. He asked if he could call her later, voice almost childlike. She hesitated, then nodded once. That single nod felt larger than any deal he had ever closed. A faint smile flickered across her face, and then vanished. As the bus pulled up, Lisa stepped aboard and looked back through the window. Leonard stood in the rain, clutching the paper, heart hammering. For the first time since the reveal, he felt a fragile string connecting them again. The bus hissed, closed its doors, and rolled away. He watched until it turned the corner, then glanced at the address in his hand. His world had narrowed to this paper, this chance, this vow. He tucked it into his coat, knowing the next step had to match the promise. Somewhere, through rain and distance, the possibility of redemption flickered. Leonard arrived at the modest apartment building with the nervousness of a first interview. The stairwell smelled of old paint and warm bread from a neighbor's oven. He carried groceries instead of flowers, unsure what gesture would feel right. Lisa opened the door, her eyes measuring his posture and the bags in his hands. Isabel sat in an armchair, a blanket over her knees, Peter drawing at the kitchen table. The room felt small, but alive, layered with the hum of a lived-in space. Leonard stood in the doorway like a man at the edge of a new map. He had been rich before, but never invited in this way. Isabel Harris looked up, her gaze both fragile and sharp. Her breathing was shallow, but her smile had corners of steel. Lisa introduced Leonard as a friend, leaving a pause after the word. He approached quietly. Greeting Isabel with a handshake, she replaced with a gentle touch. Peter peeked from the table, pencil frozen mid-line. Leonard knelt to his level and said hello, voice softer than he expected. Peter nodded, eyes wide, measuring the stranger in their space. The air thickened with possibilities neither could name yet. Lisa guided Leonard to the kitchen, pointing at the grocery. He unpacked them carefully, lining up vegetables and rice as if arranging tools. Isabel watched from the doorway, curiosity flickering behind her tired eyes. Peter returned to his drawing but stole glances between strokes. Leonard asked if he could cook something, surprising himself with the offer. Lisa raised an eyebrow but handed him a pan. He began chopping onions with a clumsy rhythm. Each slice felt like carving a path into a life he wanted to join. Dinner became a quiet ritual over the next weeks. Leonard showed up with fresh produce. Lisa handled the seasoning. Isabel supervised. Peter hovered with questions, asking about spices and knives. The kitchen filled with steam and the smell of simmering broth. Leonard found himself humming, a habit he thought he'd lost years ago. He washed dishes, wiped counters, learned where they kept the salt. Lisa watched him blend into the routine like a color drying on canvas. Isabel noticed too, saying nothing but offering an approving nod now and then. One evening, Isabel invited Leonard to sit with her after dinner. The television flickered muted images while Peter did homework at the table. She asked about his parents, his childhood, the first thing he ever wanted. He answered honestly, shedding his old, rehearsed stories. He told her about nights on the street, about his failures, about Lisa's kindness. Isabel listened with the patience of someone who had heard every kind of plea. She reached over and patted his hand once, a gesture that felt like a small pardon. Leonard blinked, surprised at how much it mattered. Peter began leaving small drawings on the counter with Leonard's name written in block letters. A boat on a river, a tower falling into water, a man holding an umbrella. Leonard kept them folded in his jacket pocket like secret messages. He started helping Peter with math, stumbling, but determined. Lisa watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, but eyes soft. Each evening knit another stitch into a fabric they had not planned. Leonard felt less like a visitor and more like a participant. The tension between past and present loosened one thread at a time. Lisa's trust grew in small increments, like a plant testing new soil. She gave him tasks, picking up prescriptions, walking Peter to school. Leonard approached each one with the gravity of a contract worth more than money. He learned the bus routes, the names of neighbors, the rhythm of the block. The city's noise now felt like background to a clearer melody. He found himself staying longer after dinner, sometimes just to sit in the silence. Lisa caught him watching Peter play and saw tenderness she hadn't expected. Isabel coughed softly and smiled, as if sensing something aligning. One Sunday morning, they all walked together to the park. The air was crisp, the trees shedding leaves in slow spirals. Peter ran ahead, kicking at a pile of red and gold. Isabel moved slowly, but insisted on walking without an arm. Leonard strolled beside Lisa, their hands brushing but not clasping. He felt the weight of belonging settle on his shoulders like a gentle cloak. Lisa glanced at him, and for a moment, her guard flickered. He smiled back, knowing some barriers need patience, not force. In quiet hours, Leonard reflected on how far he had come. The disguise had led him to humility. The The humility to Lisa, Lisa to this table. He began to see money not as a wall, but as a tool that could be silent and kind. He still worked at the warehouse, but also fixed things around the apartment. He repaired a squeaky cabinet door, patched a crack near the window. Peter watched, learning with wide eyes, copying his movements. Leonard felt a strange pride building where shame had been. It was a new language he wanted to keep learning. Yet beneath all the dinners, drawings, and quiet moments, a question remained. Could this new life survive the shadow of his old one, or was it just a reprieve? He sensed Lisa's unspoken caution, Isabel's measured acceptance, Peter's cautious hope. Each smile, each nod, each errand was still a test he had to pass. But he welcomed the tests because they tied him to something real. He woke earlier, worked harder, spoke less, but listened more. At night he lay on his cot at the warehouse dorm, thinking of their apartment's warmth. And somewhere in that warmth, a future began to sketch itself. Weeks folded into months, and Leonard's presence became as regular as the kitchen clock. He learned the subtleties of Lisa's moods, the tilt of her head when she was tired, the curl of her mouth when amused. He also noticed how Peter began to run toward him at the end of the school day. Isabel started saving him a spot on the couch, a quiet acknowledgement of belonging. Leonard worked longer shifts at the warehouse, but came back to help with dinner. He no longer counted the hours. He counted the moments. His life, once measured by contracts and mergers, now measured by smiles and nods. The contrast both humbled and anchored him. Lisa watched his consistency with cautious admiration. She saw him fixing leaky pipes, teaching Peter how to tie a stronger knot, reading recipes aloud. Each gesture wove him deeper into the fabric of their routine. She noticed he never flashed money, never hinted at his former life. Instead, he brought stories from the warehouse, tales of co-workers, small victories. He showed up even when tired, even when rained on. His hands roughened, his back stiffened, but his presence stayed steady. It was in these unglamorous efforts that trust began to regrow. Isabel warmed to him in her own quiet way. She began sharing family recipes, letting him chop onions at her pace. Sometimes she told him stories from her youth, testing his listening. He absorbed each one, asking questions with genuine curiosity. Peter drew pictures now, including Leonard, not just as a figure, but as part of the scene. One drawing showed them all at a table, heads bent toward each other. Leonard kept that drawing folded in his wallet like a hidden photograph. He thought of it during shifts, feeling it steady his resolve. Lisa began to notice small shifts in herself, too. She found her guard dropping in moments, a softness she had not felt in years. She caught herself smiling at him across the table for no reason. She realized she was asking his opinion on small things, which route to take, which soup to cook. Her mother teased her once, lightly, and she blushed but did not deny. Peter asked if Leonard would come to his school event, and she said yes before thinking. The rhythm of their lives had changed without ceremony. It felt less like adding someone new and more like remembering someone long missing. One evening after dinner, Leonard and Lisa washed dishes together. The kitchen light cast a golden glow on the sink's steel. He handed her a plate, and their fingers brushed, sparking an unexpected warmth. She looked up, caught off guard by the rush of feeling. He did not speak, only held her gaze, letting the silence do the work. Isabel watched from the living room, a knowing smile flickering before she turned away. Peter hummed to himself, oblivious to the charged quiet. In that moment, the apartment felt like a heartbeat. Leonard invited Lisa to walk with him one Sunday morning before Peter woke. They strolled through the park, dew clinging to the grass, birds stitching sound into the air. He told her about a warehouse colleague who had reminded him of his father. She told him about a dream she had of finishing her nursing degree. Their words wove together like threads, tentative but strong. They paused by a fountain where water spilled over like a slow clock. Leonard reached for her hand, this time not as a plea but as an offering. She let him hold it, her fingers tightening just enough to speak without words. Days became a pattern of small shared acts. They fixed Peter's bike chain together, rearranged Isabel's pantry, painted the hallway. Leonard learned the smell of Lisa's shampoo, the sound of her laugh. Lisa learned the way he touched the back of her chair before sitting. They found comfort in these details. The mundane turned sacred. They did not announce anything, yet something undeniable grew. The past still hovered, but the present had its own gravity. Each evening ended with a quiet glance that promised more. Leonard started saving again, but this time for a different purpose. He set aside part of each paycheck, not to display but to support. He imagined helping Lisa enroll in evening classes, easing Isabel's medication costs. He kept the plan to himself, building it brick by brick. It was not about buying trust, but sharing load. Lisa noticed his discipline without asking why. She felt a calm she had not known in years. The idea of a future no longer felt like a trick of hope. Lisa, for her part, began sketching possibilities in her mind. Could they build something steady from such a shaky beginning? Could forgiveness mature into love, not just tolerance? She watched him with Peter, watched him with Isabel, and saw a man learning. She remembered the broken moment with Mark, but it no longer stung as sharply. Instead, it felt like a mark on a map that had led here. She began to imagine a life where partnership replaced survival. That thought scared her and thrilled her in equal measure. One night, Leonard looked at her across the kitchen table. He said softly that he had found a small house outside the city. Just a thought, nothing more. Lisa raised her eyes, searching his for signs of the old life. She found only the man in front of her, hands rough, eyes steady. He said he wanted a place where Isabel could breathe easier. Peter could run in the yard. She said nothing, but her heart tilted toward the vision. They sat in the quiet, the house hovering between them like a fragile bird. And somewhere in that quiet, love became not just possible, but inevitable. Every step of Leonard's journey shows how easily a hidden truth can change the course of many lives. His disguise began as a search for answers, but became a mirror for his soul. Lisa's courage and quiet generosity didn't just uncover his secret, they reshaped his future, giving both of them a chance to build something real. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Did this story move you? Which moment touched you the most? The disguise, the revelation, or the moment they finally found each other again? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and tell us how you felt following their journey. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and leave a like. In our channel, you'll find many more powerful stories filled with conflict, discovery, and twists that reach straight to the heart. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Until next time.